This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
Hello, college basketball fans, and welcome to the Primetime Podcast. My name is Ricky Widmer, and as always, I'm joined by the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And Brandon, today on the podcast, I'm going to say it like I do every week. We got a jam-packed show this week. We're going to be talking about the Maryland Terrapins. Are they going to fall off? Are they not as primed for a Final Four? Are they a bust waiting to happen? Then we're going to be talking a little bit about the best teams from each conference who are then primed for said Final Four run. And then we're going to look at two teams from the Big Ten and kind of look at which team would we pick based on the resumes to go to the big dance. Play a little selection committee, but before we get started, I have to say something. We apparently, the Primetime Podcast, are curse artists. We are curse artists because I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but I have. Every time we talk about a team and say, like, for example, is Michigan State gonna go undefeated? Or are the Kentucky Wildcats gaining momentum at the right time? Whenever we have a topic like that, that team loses the next week. It happened to Michigan State. It's happened to Maryland. It's happened to Iowa. It's happened to Texas A&M. Sorry, Johnny. It's happened to Seton Hall. It's happened to Kentucky this past week. Brandon, whenever we talk about a team and say, oh, this team's getting good, are they for real? They lose. However, Villanova, who we've said is underrated, they haven't missed a beat. So really, Maryland shouldn't be scared this week because we're really undermining them this week.
Yeah, I think that Maryland should be scared just because of the way they've played. But you also have to look who Villanova's playing. I mean, Villanova should win those games, but
I just find it funny that we talk about a team and then they lose next week.
I still think, Ricky said to me before we came on the podcast today, Brandon, you're being thrown in here with me because we both talked about it together.
It's not just me.
I still blame it all on Ricky. He has been the kiss of death outside of... It
can't just be me.
Outside of just college basketball. He has, when he's taken his own picks and predictions, he screws all teams all across.
It can't just, you can't put all of that on me.
All across sports. And I really feel for him.
Eventually, it's going to take a toll on me as a person.
Eventually, it is going to take a toll. I hope you're going to your confession on a weekly basis because, folks, right now, it has not been good for some of the teams we've been talking about. And when I mean it's not been good, I mean they have then toppled the next week. Is Kentucky gaining momentum? Then a huge loss this past weekend in overtime on the road. And people can talk about and speculate as they did all weekend then about that play. But, that is what happens in sports.
But let's get into, though, the real meat and potatoes of the podcast. Should Maryland be worried? Are they primed to be one of the biggest busts this tournament, especially when, at the beginning of the season, they were Final Four favorites?
I don't think that Maryland needs to worry about them being big busts. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're going to be big busts, but I don't think that they're not gaining momentum. Let's say that. They get a nice win this past weekend against Michigan. It was a really good game yesterday. It was a good game on Sunday against Michigan. They win it 86-82. But let me tell you something. Your boy that you were talking about at the beginning of the season, coming into this year, Melo Trimble, he's going to be the man. Well, guess what? He has not been the man lately.
He hasn't.
He is not playing good basketball, and if they can't get him going, it's going to be hard to get them going as a team because that team, to be as good as it can be, it goes through Melo Trimble. And right now, nothing is going through Melo Trimble.
And I'm going to say the past three games, but we're going to start with the Michigan game for Melo Trimble. 35 minutes, 14 points, 8 rebounds was his stat line, only 1 assist. He also turned the ball over 7 GD times. 7 times. Then, last Thursday, at Minnesota, The loss, 35 minutes, went 10-6 with 6 assists, turned the ball over 6 times. Then in the loss to Wisconsin, 37 minutes, 10-4 and 6 points, rebounds to assists, 5 turnovers. What is the biggest similarity that you noticed in all of my stats for the last 3 games? He's had 5 or more turnovers just himself the past 3 games. That is unacceptable if you want to make a run at the Final Four. Because I'm looking at the other former games. The only other game where he had more than 5 turnovers this season, 8 when they lost to number 9 UNC.
On Sunday, in Sunday's game against Michigan, I was watching with my roommate, and I turned to him and I said, this feels like it's a conference tournament game right now. That's exactly what it felt like.
Michigan wants to get in, and they got to start now.
And the thing is, though, is that Michigan put up a good fight. They played a good game. Their first half, it was not that good, and yet they weren't down by much at halftime. But Maryland, they're going to have to do more. They're just going to have to do more because they're not going to win their conference tournament with the way they played yesterday. That's just not going to happen. At one point in the first half, you're up by 16. You only win by 4 the second half. Michigan's leading at one point. I mean, obviously, teams are going to give up leads, but you gave up that lead and you never gained it back. So I think that Maryland, they have to come out with a really good strategy, a really good game plan, and they cannot go cold. They cannot go cold, and especially Melo Trimble. He has got to get a spark. He's got to get that spark back that he had in the middle of the season. Coming down to the end of the season, they have 2 hard games coming up.
I was just going to mention it.
On the road for both of them. At Purdue, at Indiana. Those are not going to be easy games, especially on the road at Indiana, who's playing some of its best basketball right now.
Well, and the Hoosiers right now are the number 1 seed if the Big Ten tournament were to start tonight. We're recording this on Monday night on the 22nd, but yeah, Indiana's the number 1 seed right now, and those 2 losses to Minnesota and Wisconsin really hurt the Terrapins because, I mean, if we're sitting here, let's say they won those 2 games, we're sitting here today having a totally different narrative. We're saying, are the Terrapins the favorite team in the Big Ten? Right now, they're sitting at 13-2. They're a game ahead Indiana, a game ahead Iowa. Are they going to be the number 1 seed? But they lost those 2 games. They are really in 3rd in the conference. And if you're Maryland right now, you're on a must-win. You got to win 3 in a row just to help yourself for the tournament. Because the one thing, and I am going to throw this out there, the one game you did not mention in their final 3, with good reason, because they suck, and I know it because they're my team, but they play at home against Illinois. There's something about just how this late season collapses. I'm going to call it a collapse for the Terrapins is happening that, hey, you know what?
You think it's a collapse?
They might lose it. Well,
you think it's a collapse right now?
Let's call it a mini collapse because to me it looks like the other teams that they lost against, except for Michigan, but Michigan, when they lost to them earlier, they lost on the road. And I know you can say, well, Ricky, Minnesota was on the road too. Okay, but Minnesota isn't the same kind of team that Michigan is. I think Michigan's a better team than the Golden Gophers. Wisconsin, that was on your home floor. You lost by 13 points on your home floor to a Badgers team that their coach retired earlier in the season. They have not been the same team that they were last year when they went to the national championship. Other than that, I would say your other 3 losses, maybe Michigan not as big a quality, but Michigan State and UNC, those are losses that committee members are going, okay, those are good teams. Those are good teams. So I can understand that you lost to them, but this is a mini collapse. It all depends on what they do in these last 3, and I'm going to throw it out there. The percentage may be higher than you think that they lose all 3. higher than you think. Not anywhere near 50%, but higher than you would think.
I don't think that Purdue is necessarily. I don't think that Purdue is necessarily playing that well right now.
But I think it's at Purdue. So I mean, I give maybe right now a little bit of the advantage, maybe 51-50 on side of the Boilermakers, just because it's at home court.
51-50 for 101%.
Yeah, well, 51-49. You're right. Okay, checking my math. I like it. Double checking my math. 51-49.
That's why I think you keep me around, but it's just a little thought I've got. But no, I think that here's two teams right now. Maryland's not playing that great of basketball. No. I don't think Purdue is really playing that great of basketball. But it's two teams inside the conference. That game and that game on the road in Indiana, they are going to also feel, I think in my mind, they're going to feel like it's conference tournament already. I really do.
And I'm looking at this, and I know that Maryland won the first meeting on their home court against, at the time, number 18 Purdue by 9 points. No, 11 points. I did the math wrong in my head there. But if Purdue beats Maryland in their next game, then if you're Purdue, you're sitting there going, cool. If we stay put and win the rest of our games, all we need is Indiana to beat them that last time, which Indiana, to me, would be the favorite right now against Maryland. And we could have ourselves a situation where, cool, we're possibly going to be able to win a tiebreaker over the Terrapins in seeding. And if you're Maryland right now, one loss, even two losses, could drop you from third to fourth, fifth, sixth, possibly seventh or eighth in the Big Ten standings. And the way that the bracket is for that conference tournament, the last four teams are going to play the first day. Then it adds more teams. If you're Maryland, right now you're sitting at 3. You don't want to drop below 4 because those top 4 teams in the Big Ten get the 2-day bye. They get the 2-game bye.
If you're Maryland right now, you need to end strong. You want to win all 3. Worst case scenario, you win 2 out of 3.
They're probably going to win 1 out of 3. They'll probably win 2 or 1 out of the 3. However, wouldn't it be something if they lost all 3 of them? Even the one to Illinois, like a big upset shocker that we're talking about? Just let me have it. I know it's not going to happen, but let me have it.
Fine.
Malcolm
Fine, we'll
Hill,
give it to you.
Malcolm Hill buzzer beater probably won't happen, but it could. Probably won't, but it could.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll give it to you. It's the one thing I'll give to you in the podcast
They find
tonight.
out that Darren Williams, D. Brown, Rayvonte Rice all have 1 year left of eligibility, and they come back to play just for that.
Okay, yeah, now I got to cut you off.
James Augustine has a game of eligibility, too. Can I not have that hope?
No.
Can I not have that?
No, because actually there is no hope for that to happen.
There is no hope for that to happen, as they all have used up their eligibility. But yeah, I mean, for Maryland, I think the big player, you mentioned him early, has to be Melo Trimble. Has to step up because I talked about it last week. I made this point. If you want to go far in the NCAA tournament, what do you need? 3-point shooting helps, but guard play. Most of the times it's either the complete teams like the Kentucky team of last year that they just lost to a damn good team in the Wisconsin Badgers, but that Badger team I would put in the category of a complete team. Or on the other side, and we talked about them last week, the UConn Huskies that went and beat 2 years ago Kentucky in the national title. They had great guard play from Shabazz Napier. Before that, they had great guard play from Kemba Walker. So it's either great guard play or complete teams. And Maryland, they could be a complete team. They have the tools to be a complete team, but all those tools have to be working together at the same time.
I think with Melo Trimble, one thing that he needs to do to step up in my mind is, 1, limit those turnovers. Because
5, 6, and 7. That means he's going to have 8 against Purdue.
Because in all honesty, if he even just cut down on those, if it's 2 turnovers, 3, you're already helping your team because you're hopefully scoring points on the possessions where you didn't turn the ball over. and that alone helps. He just needs to get back to his mid-season form. This is late season form, and it ain't good. So he needs to go back to where he was in the middle of the season, making the big shots, taking the big shots, being the man. Right now, he's not the man. I just think that for him, he's got to limit the turnovers. He's got to score more. He hasn't been scoring.
And the one thing I do want to say is I just looked it up. In my preseason Final Four predictions, I did have Maryland as one of the teams to go to the Final Four. However, right now, if I had to look back at myself and talk to past Ricky, I would say to myself, first off, I don't know, Maryland might not make it. And then I may say to myself, really, you fucking picked Villanova to go to the Final Four? I don't know what I was thinking before the season. The number one team right now, but based on history, that doesn't look like it may happen. But before we move on...
Man, if I could go back and talk to past Ricky, I'd have some other questions to ask him as well.
But before we move on to what teams do have the best shot to make the Final Four, yes or no answer. Right now at this point, does Maryland make the Final Four? And if not, how far do they go right now?
Right now, I say no. They won't make the Final Four, and I will say that they make it to the Sweet 16.
I'm going to say the same thing, except I was going to say no. However, the bright spot is they make it farther than Villanova. How about that? 2 of my Final Four teams get knocked out before we get to... How about that? 2 of my preseason Final Four teams get knocked out before we get to the second weekend.
And I just want to say something really quick, or throw something out there. How difficult is it going to be filling out a bracket this year?
It's going to be terrible.
So hard with all the parity and all of the matchups that you're like, well, I think that this is the underdog, but I don't know, and I don't know. I'm going to love it and hate it at the same time.